All right, talking with Congressman Bill Huizenga. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you coming in.
Ken, good to be with you, and physically here,
Physically
right?
here.
Especially on a snowy, icy day like
Boy,
this.
I tell you, how are the roads out there? Are they getting any better?
Actually, it wasn't bad coming down. It was kind of 33 to 35 degrees and rainy. That though pretends to for not so good drive back home. But so we unfortunately we had to cancel a few things that were connected in with the schools. The Tri-Counties Head Start, for example. And those kinds of things. But Kiwanis luncheon was canceled, but we're filling that in, and we're going to be headed to a Boys and Girls Club, meeting with them, and then meeting with Mayor Mohammed and touring Harbor Towers. That's going to be, I think, a useful, helpful visit as we're dealing with these issues.
You raised that in an oversight committee hearing meeting. You met with the HUD Secretary, Marcia Fudge, about this issue. Are they getting back to you? Are they giving you the information you want?
Those are two different things. We did get a response. Secretary Fudge had said she would respond within 24 hours. They gave us a little bit of a status update. And I'm just reading at some of their response here. Some of the concerns have been both maintenance as well as vacancies and who some of the tenants were. They said that there's 14 residents. This is HUD saying this. 14 residents now in the process of being evicted for lease violations. Multiple citations have been given to unauthorized guests for trespassing. They are claiming that past maintenance issues have been resolved, that elevators are fixed and those kinds of things, but their quote, although there are no other maintenance projects currently in progress, the Public Housing Authority is planning to update hallway lighting, install new boilers and water heaters during the 2024 year. So we'll see. I'll see it with my own eyes. That's part of the reason why I wanted to go down there and see it. We're going to be traveling with Mayor Mohammed and some others from the community. What I had also asked for was a plan of action. So telling me that they're planning on installing hallway or boilers, hallway lighting and boilers. That's not a real plan. That's an aspiration. So we'll continue to work with Secretary Fudge and really hold their feet to the fire. One positive, absolute positive, is that we've gotten their attention. So they conclude that they will be having a representative from HUD's Office of Public and Indian Housing will be coming in early February. So don't have a date yet. We're going to be working with them. We want to be there as well to experience what they're experiencing. I don't suspect that they're going to be able to shine the apple too much based on what I've heard previously. I expect that there's some real issues, and we're going to keep pushing on that for the betterment of the community.
I was going to ask you about that as well. So you're working at the top levels of government with the HUD secretary, but you're also working with local officials?
Yeah, we are. Mayor Mohammed is going to be with us on the tour today. He and others have brought this to our attention over the last year plus now that I've been representing Benton Harbor and the area. And so like I said, we wanted to go in, and my background's real estate. And that's something that my family's been involved in, construction and real estate. And I wanted to see it for my own, with my own
You might
eyes.
want to wear a mask. I've heard stories about just how dilapidated some areas of that are, some of the mold issues, some of the trash chutes being nailed shut. So
yeah, those are the stories we've heard. Like I said, it's going to be pretty hard if and when I'm able to show up and say, "Hey, Secretary Fudge, here's the photos I took when I went through there. So, what are you going to do to help our constituencies?"
So we'll look forward to a solution on that in the near term. It'll probably take money, and one of the other things that you're talking about in Congress right now is money. $34 trillion in debt. The federal government right now. And counting. I mean, we've talked about this before. How do you get out of $34 trillion in debt? You've got legislation that just passed the House Budget Committee.
Yeah, we do. And just as a little bit of a table setter, it's really, frankly, mind-boggling what these numbers are. And it's not a simple going from 33 to 34 is just one more of something. It's the 12 zeros behind it. Yeah, and I do this when I go in to talk to school groups or senior groups or wherever, just for perspective. Yeah, I tell people at some point today, just jot down a 1 with 12 zeros behind it. And then don't start at the left, start at the right and see what $1,000 is and 10,000 and 100,000 and 1,000,000 and 100 million. And then you're into the billions. I mean, so this is 1,000 billions. And when we're seeing this coming at us, and it's obvious that it's coming at us, why would we not choose to do something about it and be proactive? And so the legislation that I passed, it's a bipartisan piece of legislation. Scott Peters, Democrat from California, he and I chair something called the BFF, the Bipartisan Fiscal Forum.
Okay.
It's an equal part of Republicans and Democrats that have come together and said, we've got to do something about our debt and our deficits and this 34 and counting trillion dollars in debt that we have. Because here's the reality of it, Ken. The interest on that debt is now approaching every dollar what we spend domestically and every dollar what we spend on defense. And so when you're doing that, guess what? That's squeezing out the priorities in those two areas, whether it is on the defense side or whether it's on domestic spending. Not to mention, how do we spend down or pay down, I should say, pay down this $34 trillion in debt? So that's sort of the insult on injury, is not only are we paying this much interest to maintain this debt, we're actually adding to it. So even if we see interest rates go back down a little bit, which they appear that they have somewhat, because we are adding more to that bottom line of what we owe, we're still going to see those interest payments continuing to go up. So it's really become a limiting factor on what we've been able to do. And we can kind of esoterically talk about, well, whether it's a new Gerald R. Ford class aircraft carrier, which is, billions and billions of dollars, or whether it's Harbor Towers. Right. I mean, it is both of those things, that are feeling a pressure and a pinch and a squeeze if we are not willing to take tough decisions and make tough decisions and have tough conversations. But we've got to wrestle this dragon down to the ground, in my opinion.
How do you sustain something that's $34 trillion in debt? Where's the default point?
It's a good question, and I don't want to find that default point. But what we do know is that the U.S. dollar has been weakened on the international world currency. We were and still mostly are the central currency in the world. Why? Because of the faith and credit of the U.S. government. So we're eroding that. China is coming in and making the argument to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and other international organizations that they too ought to be one of those what are viewed as a world currency. Right now it's the yen, it's the euro, it's us. And they want to be added to that. So far, we've been able to kind of hold them off. Because they aren't transparent and they don't have some of the markers of what European Central Bank or our central bank have. But their argument is sort of, look, you guys are turning into a fiat currency of magnitudes that nobody had ever dreamed of. Meaning, you're just racking up all this debt. We can do this. And that's a huge problem. So we're eroding ourselves on the world stage, and I'm bound and determined to do something about that. I think we owe it to our kids and our future grandkids to do so.
We should probably park the car in the garage these days, because the repo guy is going to be out front soon.
It's hard to imagine what we are getting ourselves into when we have a significant amount of that borrowing is being held by foreign nations.
Yeah.
All right. And I don't want a foreign nation repo man, as you put it, coming in and saying, you know what, you're cut off. Think of the shock waves into our economy. Think of the shock waves to us societally. And again, why people would deny that we have a problem is a head scratcher to me, and why they would be content with not doing anything about it. Because here's the simple fact. And this isn't me saying this. This isn't Scott Peters. This isn't right, left, or center. This is the trustees of the Social Security Trust Fund have identified that if we do not do something about this by 2033, they are going to have to, by law, put in a 23 to 24% cut in everybody's Social Security benefits. That's people drawing on Social Security right now. And I think we have a moral and social obligation to protect those that are in Social Security right now. I'm turning 55 at the end of this month. I've got a little time to adjust. Certainly my kids that range from 26 down to 17, they are going to have a lifetime of work ahead of them to adjust some of those things. I'm pretty sure that Warren Buffett's going to be okay with a 23% cut to his Social Security. He's not going to care. Because he's not going to feel it. But I'm worried about those people that I went to high school with who haven't had those same opportunities, right? And who are going to be dependent on it, and not in the not too distant future. And if they're getting, $1,000 a month or even $2,000 a month, suddenly seeing a 23 or 24% cut to that. I mean, how do you go from living on $1,000 Social Security check down to less than $700 dollars, or 700, I guess it'd be $750 a month. I mean, that's real money when you're going out and having to pay for prescriptions and pay for your heating and your rent and all those things. And that to me is a travesty. And we've got to make sure that we are able to protect those folks.
And you also have a provision in there, I believe, 75-year solvency.
Yeah.
How does that work?
That's what we identified. We'll see what the Senate ends up passing. There's been some discussion of shortening that time frame and that window just to allow for the math to work a little easier. But frankly, whether it's 50 years or 75 years, we've got to lean into this, and we've got to start shoring that up. And the idea is we want this safety net system to be there for the next generation. So we picked 75 years, but whether it's a working generation or a full lifetime, we've got to get serious about it. And now's the time.
You've got some serious power on the other side of the Capitol. Joe Manchin from West Virginia, Mitt Romney, a familiar name in Michigan.
Yep.
How'd you get them? That's awesome.
This is an issue that they've been very concerned about and have talked about. And we started seeing each other at some dinners and meetings and having this conversation. And it's been an interesting journey over the last couple of years on this. We had been making some real progress with this. At the time, we called it the 30 by 30 group, which is now what we call our bipartisan fiscal forum, because it was 30 Republicans and 30 Democrats who came together, and we actually signed a letter to both the House leadership and the Senate leadership about being cautious about our spending and where we were going, and with some small incremental suggestions of what we can and should do. COVID really kind of set that on the sideline. The spending that happened during COVID, and I would argue that much of it was gratuitous, unnecessary, because we at the very beginning we all agreed the Paycheck Protection Program, for example, needed to be done. There was a few of those types of things because you literally had both a local, state, and federal level government telling businesses, doesn't matter what your business practice is, you're shutting down. You're not allowed to operate. That in my mind is a takings. And of course, we had to protect folks who, again, no fault of their own, suddenly were having their paychecks disappearing. So we had to do some of those things in the short term. But then it just became gratuitous in my mind, and it became one-sided. There wasn't any Republican votes for a number of those programs, the Inflation Reduction Act and things like that, because they didn't have to. They had the Democrats had a majority in the House, a majority in the Senate, and the White House, of course. And so that spending spree really sort of threw some real hiccups into our efforts. But I think emerging out of that, my colleagues on the other side, a number of them are realizing and acknowledge that we've gone too far. We've got to true this up somehow. We've got to make sure that we aren't adding, and the next time we have a fiscal or an economic hiccup, that we're not going to just be adding trillions of dollars of federal spending again on top of that, right? Without trying to battle this down. I mean, we're really literally taking tools out of the toolbox, and just paying interest on it at this point. So that it's been right, center, and left that have been involved in this. We just had a dinner with a group a week ago or so, and it's Peter Welch from Vermont,
yep,
and Saxby Chambliss from Georgia.
Yeah,
I mean, two polar opposites politically on most things, but they're coming together. Same thing on the House side, where we've got folks acknowledging the problem, and that is a huge step. And I think that's what this budget committee passage was. We had it was bipartisan coming out of committee. There was a couple of others who were no votes, who were very close to being yes votes. But when Earl Blumenauer, and I've gotten to know Earl very well, we would struggle to agree that today is Tuesday on most things.
You got to watch the people with bow ties.
Yeah, exactly. No, but he's a genuine, thoughtful, traditional liberal. And he would call himself that, progressive. But he voted yes coming out of that committee, and he understands that this is an issue that we have to tackle. And so, if Earl Blumenauer and I can get together on this, just about anybody can and should be able to.
We'll keep an eye on that one. Yeah. But talking about politics, staying on politics, as we're recording this today, New Hampshire is having the primary. Nikki Haley got all 6 votes in I can't even remember the name of it, Notch Corners or something like that. Anyway, so when New Hampshire is closed up, are we going to see Trump walk away with the primary?
Yeah, I think so. I think he already has, frankly. Whether people like it or not, I think that the 2024 election is going to be a 2020 redo. I don't see a scenario where Dean Phillips is going to topple Joe Biden. I think he is going to be the nominee, short of something medical happening, right? And same thing with Donald Trump. I mean, Nikki Haley isn't going to win South Carolina. That's her own state that she was the governor of. And I've met her a number of times. I've certainly watched her closely. I think she's been an important voice. I think that what has happened in Iowa and then leading into New Hampshire has been distorting really what the Republican Party has kind of stood for. So from that standpoint, it hasn't always been healthy. But it's a necessary debate that has to play out. And I just don't see any other scenario where Donald Trump isn't the Republican nominee, and same thing with Joe Biden on the Democrat side.
Now, you've endorsed Donald Trump for president, and so why is he the right choice?
Well, because I think he is, first of all, look at track record. I actually had just had somebody, a neighbor of mine, text me over the weekend. And he said, "Give me one reason why I should vote for Donald Trump." Yeah. Well, I gave him a few, and I said, let's you can parse foreign policy, okay. And I'm not talking about whether Russia would or wouldn't have invaded Ukraine, or would Hezbollah and Hamas invaded Israel, or would Taiwan be in sort of the peril that it's in with China. I'm talking NAFTA, right? That what became the USMCA. This was something that he literally was laughed about at for even bringing up. And the guy actually did it. You look at some of the other trade situations that we've had around the world. There were successes. You look at NATO and forcing European countries who, by treaty, are supposed to be at 2% of their GDP, who weren't even close to that, suddenly meeting that, and in some cases exceeding that. And certainly after watching what Russia did to Ukraine, that got a lot of people's attention in Europe, who were very used to us just carrying the water for them, and that was a huge problem. Then you move domestically. You talk about the growth rate of our economy, and this, again, in all fairness, was pre-COVID. But when we were clipping along at 4, 5, sometimes 6% economic growth, rather than the 2 years of 2% economic growth under the Obama-Biden administration, when you're at 2% to 4%, that's not a 2% increase. That's a doubling of the economic expansion. And we had a very, very healthy economy with what was going on. And we saw wages rising. We saw home ownership going up. We saw it across communities, in the minority communities, regionally, socioeconomically, didn't matter. Every demographic virtually was improving. I want to return to that. I want to go back to that. Then also on the domestic side, I look at what I have to battle every day in the Financial Services Committee with regulators, whether it's banking regulators, insurance regulators, the Security and Exchange Commission. We have seen a pattern of regulators exceeding their legal limits. And how do we know this? Because even the courts have been slapping them down. They've been pushing them back. And saying, sorry, Mr. or Mrs. Bureaucrat, you haven't been given this power by Congress, yet you are trying to assert it that way. And there's some very, very important Supreme Court cases that have occurred. Think West Virginia versus EPA, but there's another one right now, sort of the herring case, as they call it, about the fishermen, and whether these fishermen could have the federal government come in and force them to pay for someone to be on their boat to monitor their fishing. Yeah, I mean, it was going to completely shut down the fishing operations up in
That'd
in
be
Alaska.
uncomfortable.
And, yeah, amazingly.
Yeah.
But the whole notion of the Chevron doctrine, as it's referred to legally, is this notion of, okay, what is a reasonable interpretation of a law that is passed by Congress? And time again, we've seen this administration exceed that. Why? Because we just think this is the right thing to do. Well, I'm sorry, that's not how our constitutional system is set up. You need to have alignment with the House, the Senate, and the White House for a bill to pass, not just have a blank check handed to a bureaucrat to interpret something the way that they want to do it. So, in my mind, there's a number of reasons why I think he's the right candidate. Is he a challenge? Oh, absolutely. You definitely has an opinion about everything. But
on that point, if I could, you mentioned you've got to have alignment between the House, the Senate, and the White House. A lot has changed since even the last time Donald Trump was president.
Yeah.
And he didn't have an easy time with Congress at that point. How does he get through this if he gets into the primary and wins that, if he gets into the White House?
Yeah, well, his first 2 years of being in office in 2017 and 2018, we had the majority in the House and the majority in the Senate. It was thin, it was tight, but we did the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We saw a lot of the regulation, in fact, that coming out of the Obama administration, a lot of that get rolled back and put back in place. In fact, the first bill that President Trump signed, it was February 14 of 2017, happened to be my bill. Yeah. And it was regarding energy companies and the Securities and Exchange Commission and what they were forcing some of these energy companies to do as they were doing exploration overseas. And that got signed into law. Certainly when 2019, after the 2018 election and Nancy Pelosi became speaker again, instantly it was impeachment, right? It was the Russia hoax. It was the discussion about before he was even sworn in. If you listen to people like Maxine Waters and others, they were talking about impeaching the President Trump even before he was sworn in. So that's a pretty tough environment.
Right.
There is absolutely no doubt. I wish we could get beyond that. I don't see that happening. But here's the facts. All of these calls that democracy was going to end and that the United States was going to fail and that we were literally going to be overnight, have people thrown in jail and all the other outrageous charges that were there. It didn't happen. And he's already been president for 4 years. And again, I think if you look at the policies, you can argue that we were in a far better place on many of those policies, certainly for me philosophically about size, role, and scope of government. So the doomsday dark clouds looming on the horizon argument may fall a little hollow when may show themselves to be a little hollow to voters. So we'll see. I do know this, Ken. Yeah. Michigan's going to be at the epicenter of it again. Yeah. No doubt in my mind. You had Donald Trump with a very, very narrow win in 2016. You had Joe Biden with a win in 2020. Michigan is going to be the epicenter. Our congressional seats that are up. We have a Senate seat that is up, U.S. Senate seat, all of the state House seats that are up. There's going to be a lot of political activity here in Michigan.
Well, and speaking of Michigan and politics and the Republicans, who's the chairman of the GOP in Michigan right now?
I don't know.
What's happening there?
I honestly, I have kind of pulled myself back from a lot of that because sadly, a lot of the Michigan Republicans have metaphorically been engaging in a circular firing squad here, and they've been more concerned about taking each other out than they have been in having robust political debate with our political opponents. And that isn't helpful by any stretch of the imagination. And it really is, it feels like every candidate for themselves right now. You can't count on whether it's in some places, you can't count on the county parties. You certainly can't count on the state party. They don't have the resources. They don't have the organization. I understand the frustration that a lot of people have had. I used to work for Pete Hoekstra. I was his district director. I spent 6 years on staff with Pete. He's been a friend for a very, very long time, even preceding that. I'm not sure why he would want to do this to himself, but I think here we are again. We're going to be focused on court challenges and having somehow the courts sort through who's going to be the chair of the party.
Should Christina Caramo step down?
I will leave that to the delegates. I don't think she's been effective as a party chair. I thought that from the very beginning, that was going to be her biggest challenge. And I don't think she's been organized. I don't think she's been able to go in and strike a chord. So, in my mind, she's not effective. That doesn't mean she should or shouldn't be removed. That's up for those delegates to decide.
Yeah, but you got to think 2024 election year, big important elections that you just talked about. Does the party really want to focus on this?
No, it shouldn't. I wish we were focusing on how we can get our positive message out to the voters to let them understand that we can govern. This does not look like governing, Ken, and that's sad because I know we can. But frankly, whether it's dysfunction in Washington or dysfunction here in the state of Michigan, that doesn't breed any kind of confidence, and we can't count on the stumbles of our political opponents either. Certainly, I think they've been stumbling a lot. But that's not a winning strategy, right? Dan Campbell isn't going to lead the Lions to victory by saying, "Hey, let's just hope San Francisco sucks." Next Sunday, he's got it. Sorry for you Bears fans that are listening. You had a rough year, but he's got to have a proactive plan. Well, so do we. And right now, that formal party structure isn't there, and it doesn't have that. And so that means we as candidates are having to do that, and which is okay. I mean, we've got a great organization. I got great supporters and great folks that are behind our efforts, and we're going to keep banging away at it. I've got, looks like I'll have a primary opponent, at least somebody who has announced. I've got 3 Democrat opponents who have announced. So this is the very public job review that people like me get every 2 years. And that's okay. That is part of the process. I relish it because I'm proud of my work in Washington. I'm proud of how I've represented our communities, and look forward to doing it again. But this is this democracy thing is kind of messy sometimes, right? It's our representative republic is intended to be robust and at times have friction. Guess what? There's a lot of countries that don't have that, but those are called dictatorships. We don't want that. We need to make sure that our voices are being heard in that process.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll leave it there.
All right.
Thank you very much, Congressman Bill Huizenga, joining us. Thank you for joining us on such an icy day and making it here.
Yeah, well, we were glad to be here. We went a little slower. I'm afraid drive home might be even a little slower yet, but hope everybody stays safe out.
See,
on the
there
roads.
you can pass federal legislation to allow all states to have studs on your tires, so we can all get around during the ice. Thank you.
I think we're going to have the Michigan Department of Transportation have something to say.
The roads
about
can't
that
get
one.
any worse.
Yeah, well, fair point. Fair point.
All right.